Hello everyone, Ace Combat Fan here to talk to you about Ace Combat 7's VR mode. I'm making this video to those of you who just found out about Ace Combat 7 and want to know more about Ace Combat 7's VR mode. If you want to know what are the features gonna be, what are the planes, how many missions are gonna be there, how long does the campaign last of the VR mode, what's gonna be the story, what's gonna be the gameplay. That's the kind of question I'll be answering as we go in this video. And the objective here is just make sure that you have all the information necessary to decide, should you buy this game, should you really invest into playing the VR mode of Ace Combat 7? That of course, it's up to you. But there's a lot of stuff we have to cover right here, so here are some timestamps of which sections of the video will be there, so you can maybe prioritize which one you want to watch. And I made sure to use the most up-to-date information regarding the development of the game, so you have the most up-to-date specs or facts about how the VR mode is gonna be. And I just wanted to let you guys know that I did play a little bit of Ace Combat 7's VR mode, so you get the best of the two worlds, having the facts and having someone with some experience playing the VR mode. So let's begin with an outline of the main features of Ace Combat 7's VR mode. So in the VR mode, you can play the story, you can play the free flight mode, and you can also play in what's so-called an Airshow mode, which I'll describe later on. It's very important for me to tell you that the story mode in the VR mode is different from the main game. It's a totally different story, and you cannot play the full game in VR. With that said, the VR story mode has only 3 missions and 4 playable aircraft: the F-18F, the A-10C, the Sukhoi 30M2, and the F-22 Raptor. Now I know some of you may ask, ACF, then why did they just make 3 missions VR instead of doing the complete game? The answer for that is Ace Combat 7's VR mode still is an experiment for the developers. It's their first time doing VR, and also there's really a lot of limitation doing Ace Combat in VR just because of how the story, which is a very important component of the series, would be protracted if it was in a VR, because I don't know, the cutscenes would just be weird with you in the middle of the enemies, or it's just really hard to make the story VR compatible. And of course, there are some hardware limitations as well. Speaking of hardware, it's important for me to tell you that Ace Combat 7's VR mode is only available on PlayStation VR, not Xbox, because it doesn't have, or PC such as Oculus Rift. It's only PS4. Based on the 2 out of the 3 VR missions that I have played, I estimate that the VR campaign of Ace Combat 7 is gonna last roughly 45 minutes to someone who is experienced in Ace Combat, and about 1 hour to someone who is relatively new to the series. But these estimates that I did, of course, they only take into account that you're gonna be playing the campaign mode only once, but in my personal opinion, I think there's a lot of replay value in just playing the campaign over and over again, just because it's very immersive and very fun to dogfight and see everything in virtual reality. With that out of the way, now let's talk about the story, because the story is very important in an Ace Combat game. Might be not the thing you expect, but it's true. So the story of the VR mode again is very different from the main story of the main events of Ace Combat 7. The timeline is actually different. The events of Ace Combat 7's VR mode take place in the year of 2014, so about 5 years prior to the events of Ace Combat 7 and about 9 years after the end of Ace Combat 4. Now, the protagonist in Ace Combat 7's VR mode is the same protagonist as Ace Combat 4, which is Mobius 1, who's also known to be our Lord and Savior, Mobius 1. And basically what his goal is in the story mode of Ace Combat 7's VR mode is to fight back against Free Erusia, which is a rebel or / insurgency movement who tries to regain independence of the country of Erusia, who is under occupation by the Allies since the Allies won the last war, which was the war in Ace Combat 4. Now, the interesting thing is, this is not the first time Free Erusia strikes. Actually, Free Erusia comes from the arcade mode of Ace Combat 5, and it's basically the same thing where Mobius 1 just has to go them and kick their asses and teach them a lesson again in Ace Combat 7's VR mode. So the story is relatively very simple. There is some nostalgia to those of you who have played the past games, like Ace Combat 4. You see some of the same characters such as AWAC Sky Eye, and you can see Omega 11 and some like Viper, Rapier, some pilots from Ace Combat 4. But the story itself, it's not really that detailed. The characters are very simple. It's nothing you would compare to the main game of Ace Combat 7. It's just basically, oh, Free Erusia is attacking us again, and let's kick their asses, and basically, that is it. Now, this being an Ace Combat game, there is a little bit of story development as you go in the mission with the radio comms between your friends and your enemies as well. But I think the main portion of the story is actually passed on through the briefings and debriefings of each mission, because they actually make some references and do some world building related to the past events of Ace Combat 4, and you can also see a little bit of their implications to the future events of Ace Combat 7. And it goes without saying that if you're interested in the story, just check out this other video that I recorded, which is basically Mission 1 of Ace Combat 7's VR mode. In terms of gameplay, the VR mode is almost the same as the non-VR mode of Ace Combat 7. The controls are roughly the same, the main difference being that in the VR mode you do have to take a look inside your cockpit and look at your radar, where you'll be able to see your position as well as where the enemies are located. You can also take a look inside the cockpit to see the information regarding your weapons, such as your ammunition remaining, your flares, and the damage of your aircraft. Also important to say that some instruments are functional, so you look inside the cockpit, you're gonna see some dials moving, you're gonna see lots of switches. Although you cannot touch them, they're still almost interactive as they move accordingly to your actual aircraft movement. And the same goes to the pilot inside the cockpit. You can see his hands moving as you accelerate, decelerate, as you move your stick left and right. You can also see his legs moving as you yaw left or right, and you can see some details on his outfit, such as even his oxygen masks. In terms of the experience playing the VR mode, I thought it was really fun just because you get to see your enemies, you can move your head around the cockpit and look at different angles. That is especially useful when you know there are missiles coming after you, so you can look behind and check where they're coming from. And kind of the same goes for your enemies, where you're flying your aircraft in one way but you're looking another way to see what the enemy is doing. Although that does require a little bit of coordination, a little bit of awareness to know where you're going and what your plane is doing, and also be checking out the enemy and what his reactions to your moves are going to be. Now, whenever you talk about a VR game where you have to move your head constantly side to side to check enemy aircraft, enemy missiles, or just the terrain in general, we have to talk about motion sickness. And the thing is, I did not feel motion sick at all while I was playing the game, despite all my head movement. Now, I'm not sure if this is because I'm used to playing Ace Combat games or flight games, or because I was concentrating or I knew I had some awareness of where my plane was going and where I was looking at. Personally, I thought everything went very smooth. I think the thing is, you just have to know where you're looking for, or just look straight instead of looking at the ground, because things are moving pretty fast. Although some other people, like the guy from GameSpot, when he played the VR mode, he did say he felt a little bit of motion sickness. But at the same time, he also said he hasn't played an aviation game in a long time. So, my personal opinion, I think is if you are used to flight games, you shouldn't feel motion sickness at all. And if you do feel at least in the beginning, well, I guess you're gonna end up getting used to it. It's just the main thing is basically having your awareness of know what the plane is going to do, where it's going, and being able to look around accordingly. My overall impression of the graphics in the VR mode was that everything was well done. You know, you get close to the enemy aircraft and you get to see a little of the details. You get even to see a little bit of the markings, you know, the roundels on the paint. You can also see the environment was really well done. With the sky, with the clouds, you can go inside them. You see some of the water droplets in your canopy forming up. You look at the water from high altitude, you can see there's different colors, you can see the waves. My only issue was with the vegetation. In Mission 2, there's a takeoff sequence. If you look at the grass, the grass just looks ugly. And some of the trees, you get close to them, they look not so good. The thing is, for that, you're gonna have to fly at very low altitude to be able to notice, which is what everybody's pretty much gonna do if they're playing the VR. But I think overall, with the exception of the vegetation, everything in the graphics was well done. You can also see the smoke of your missiles, of enemy aircraft, especially if you damage, you can see the black smoke. So I think in terms of graphics, everything was well done, including the reflections from the sun as well. Some miscellaneous things I wanted to touch on the VR campaign is the music. If you've played the previous Ace Combat games, you're gonna get a huge sense of nostalgia of just hearing some remixes of some classic Ace Combat tracks. And another thing is that you do get to see the same, comms display. You can actually read them when you're playing on VR if you do have the time. So I think in that aspect, it really feels like an arcade mode of an Ace Combat game. It's like the revival of Ace Combat 5 arcade mode. And I should also mention that with the aircraft, you do unlock them separately from the main mode of Ace Combat 7, so it's a different unlocking. You don't use the aircraft tree, but their special weapons are also available on the VR mode. So you get to play even with the railgun of the F-18, which is actually pretty fun. And lastly, I should also talk about the Airshow mode. The thing with the Airshow mode is you are the one viewing the airshow as if it was in a VR. You're not the one flying the plane in the Airshow mode. So here's the thing. You're gonna go, I think, to a carrier, and you're gonna see from that point of view some F-18s doing some airshow maneuvers. Basically, what you do is you're actually able to choose which maneuvers you want the aircraft to perform, and they will perform basically in front of you. Now, the thing is, with this mode, you also do get to listen to some classic Ace Combat soundtracks, so it's also more of a sentiment of nostalgia, which is gonna be there. And basically, the whole goal from what the Project Aces team said that they wanted to do with giving this VR airshow mode was actually, put you in a real airshow location and just have that feeling of just being in an airshow. Like, it is kind of like a private airshow because you can control the maneuvers, you can control the order of the maneuvers, but you're not the one flying the plane in the airshow mode. Okay, so it is very important for me to stress this. Now, after me saying all of this, you might ask me, Ace Combat fan, so do you recommend me getting this game for the VR, yes or no? And my answer to that is, it depends. If you are a crazy person for Ace Combat, such as myself, I'll say totally go for it. The nostalgia and the gameplay factors are just there. You're gonna have a really fun time. If you already have the PSVR, I'll say yeah, go ahead as well, because it's a very interesting experience and you're still getting the main non-VR game, so it's a pretty good deal. But if you don't have the VR and this is like, should I buy the VR headset and all the hardware just to play Ace Combat 7 VR? My answer to that is I don't really know. Personally, I thought it was really interesting. The gameplay was very fun, but I don't know how to quantify the value of buying the PSVR with your enjoyment, because that really depends on a person per person. If you are already planning to get some other VR titles, then I'll say definitely consider Ace Combat 7. But the thing is, I don't know. I hope what I've said in this video has become helpful for you to decide on if you want to buy the VR or not buy the VR. But at the end of the day, it's your decision. I just hope you made an informed one, so you have no regrets on whatever you choose. And I'll finish it off here. I just wanted to thank you for watching, and please do let me know if you have any questions, put them in the comments, and subscribe if you are planning to get Ace Combat 7, so you're updated with the news, the new gameplay, and all those Ace Combat related things.